So, it's been a hot minute that we did one of these things, because last time that we did a video like this, that was when 2020 was still a thing. Yeah, it's been a hot minute, but with Overdress now being a thing and set 2 just dropped, I think it's the perfect time to kickstart or rekindle this series and to give you guys a good catalog of all types of deck profiles for every single build and to give you guys a good starting point for building your own decks. And we're going to start off the new Deck Spotlight series with my favorite deck in Overdress, and honestly, I never thought I would main a Dragon Empire deck that's more designed after Kagero. But here we are, because my favorite deck in Overdress is Nirvana. Stand up! Vanguard! Chakrabarthi Divine Dragon Nirvana is the brand new boss unit for the Overdress archetype, which specializes in overdressing Trickster in various forms of Vairina. By doing so, the deck can create massive power columns and unlock powerful abilities ranging from field control, draw power, and even multi-attacks. And at the center of this lies Nirvana. Nirvana is the main powerhouse behind the Overdress deck, as he puts the raw numbers behind your attacks and enables your Overdress units. Nirvana excels at generating big numbers with high pressure every single turn, and even though overdressing units cost more resources to do so, Nirvana has plenty of ways to not only keep the pressure high, but can easily replenish those resources. Nirvana's first ability allows you to discard a card from your hand to resurrect any Trickstars lost during the match. This allows you to set up your Overdress plays, as Trickstar is the base form for all your Overdress targets. You can combine this with Vairina Erger to negate the discard cost of putting an Overdress unit on the board. When you've established an Overdress field, you can unleash Nirvana's second ability for massive damage. On attack, you can counterblast 1 to give Nirvana and all your units with the Overdress ability plus 10k power. This is somewhat similar to the power increase you get from Persona Riding. This allows Nirvana to make every single attack count, and it also capitalizes on the early aggression if you could ramp up early damage. Keep in mind, this ability only looks at units with the Overdress ability. They don't have to be in the Overdress state to acquire this power increase. The first units we need to talk about are the Overdress specific right lines. The grade 1 Blaze Maiden Reno. She allows us to get a free Trickster on the board by turn 2, right on time to overdress in any of our grade 2 targets, from which currently we have 3. 2 of them are power attacks and the other draws us more cards. If we move up to the grade 2, we have Blaze Maiden Reiju. This card allows us on turn 3 to fetch a base Vairina from deck to hand. This helps us to always have an Overdress target in the off chance we didn't draw into one at this stage. But it also allows us to thin the deck by 1 card. The Soul Blast cost can also be used, as we could opt to run Trickstar as a starter, which means we can Soul Blast the Trickstar and then use Nirvana's skill to put the Trickstar onto the field, which can help us to set up a full front row of Overdress units with the already called Trickstar of Vairina. Moving on to the main deck, we have a base Vairina, which can be a solid attacker and gives us field control options, but it's mainly a core card as it's searchable by the right line, especially with the new Vairina being almost point for point a direct upgrade, that being Vairina Erger. Erger can achieve the same power columns as base Vairina, but it also is a 15k interceptor, and the power also stays during your opponent's turn. And just like Vairina, Erger has a Soul Blast 2 ability, but this generates countercharge and achieves multi-attacks, making this card a bit more desired. We also have Vairina Erger, which is arguably the best Vairina, as it allows us to draw multiple cards, which negates the cost of the Overdress mechanic, and it gives the gas Nirvana needs to survive into the late game. This card is the ideal Overdress target on turn 2, the moment you call Trickster off of Reno. The final Vairina form we have is Vairina Valiente. This grade 3 can be a massive powerhouse that's hard to get rid of and allows you to put pressure behind your big numbers. If your opponent's at 4, you can put the crit on the other column, as both attacks can pressure lethal, as Valiente can swing twice, so they are forced to block at least once, either on the first go or the second swing. Beyond the Overdress units, we have some other key units, one being Blaze Maiden Aruna. This grade 1 allows you to achieve solid column numbers with Trickster, as it can make an 18k or 28k attack during the Persona Ride turn. This can be useful on turn 2 if you can't Overdress Trickster and want to push for damage, but it's mainly important for an Erger turn, as you need to attack with Trickster and you want that attack to at least matter in some capacity. Another way to make those multi-attack matters is with Stealth Dragon Tensha Stat. This card allows you to fetch your persona right. This is especially great in combination with Erger, as it generates a passive 10k power, making all the attacks matter, it generates 1 more soul in case you need it, and deck filters for 1 extra card, making those potential drive checks even more threatening. The last 2 cards work perfectly with Blaze Fist Monk Daimari. This card allows you to achieve 1 extra attack in a turn while adding back the field control aspect that we lose by not using base Vairina's ability. If we combine this with the persona right consistency of Tensha Stat, then this card will hit for 23k power that goes into a 15k Trickstar and then in a 40k Erger, which is pretty solid. But if we have an Aruna on the field, then that Trickstar attack would be 28k, making each attack rise in power, which helps to negate potential defensive triggers. Now, most people will choose for the standard ride line with Sunrise Egg, Blaze Maiden Reno, Blaze Maiden Reiju, and Chakrabarthi Divine Dragon Nirvana, and that is a solid choice. It gives you your Trickstar, it searches your Vairina, and sometimes you get that extra draw on turn 1. However, I personally would go for this ride line where Trickstar is your starter. Yes, you might lose that 1 draw in the early game, but in return, you always get access to that second Trickstar, which enables you a full Overdress board on turn 3, and it gives you 1 extra slot in your deck to put something else in. And 1 extra deck space in a deck as Nirvana is very much appreciated. The ideal trigger lineup for Nirvana is 8 crits, 3 of the new 20k shield front, 4 heals, and the Dragon Empire overtrigger. The crits are perfect to put pressure behind your big numbers, plus it synergizes nicely with a Valiente turn. The fronts are mainly here for defensive purposes. The 20k shield is a massive increase in shield value, but if you hit one on a defensive check, then it also protects your important Overdress rearguards, which is a nice bonus. Now the other options you can play are a 4th new front instead of a crit trigger, and you can also opt to play draws instead of fronts altogether. However, that does lower the overall shield value quite a bit, and it doesn't provide you with the same defensive options that the fronts provide. Now it's finally time to show you guys my personal list. So for set 2 Nirvana, I currently play the following build. So of course, for the right line, we see the basic variant with Trickstar as a starter for the higher consistency of flooding the board with Overdress cards. We also see the core Overdress package. I'm currently running only 2 Valiente as he isn't the main powerhouse of the deck anymore. That honor goes to Erger nowadays. Valiente is here more as a mid-game pressure tool for when my opponent is still at 3 to 4 damage. And on top of that, I reduced the base Vairina from the usual 3 to only 2 copies. This is just for the right line fetch, as this is the lowest I currently feel comfortable with to still have that consistency. Now, the rest of the slots of this deck is completely built around benefiting from a big multi-attack turn. Tensha Stat is here to have those persona right numbers during the big push turn, and Daimari and Aruna put even more numbers behind those turns. Now the main idea behind this big turn is that you want to wait until your persona road, as that gives you plus 40 to 50k power, and seen as Daimari costs a soul and Erger too, the moment you persona right, you will have exactly enough soul to do so, minus the soul blast of the right line of course. Now, you don't have to go for this main play. This is the reason why Daimari is just a 2-off. You can still play regular tempo Nirvana with the high numbers and consistency, persona right turns, with occasionally an Erger turn throw in here and there. A thing to keep in mind with this deck is that if your opponent doesn't clear the board, you have the scenario that you could be stuck on an Arcs that doesn't do anything the following turn, as normally you want to overdress Arcs into a Valiente at some point. But with only 2 Valiente, this doesn't happen as often. So be careful when you have a board filled with Overdress units and use them as interceptors the moment you can replace them with something better. Now that said, overdressing Valiente over base Vairina or Erger is usually not worth it, as it turns those 20k attackers into 23k attackers. So losing a card in hand for a 3k buff is not really worth it, so you want to overdress him either over a Trickstar, but preferably over an Arc that was called a turn earlier. The great thing about this deck is that you can customize this list quite significantly. You can drop the 2 Daimari to make room for other cards. Tenchastad as well as Aruna are also spaces that can be used for something else. Now that said, both these grade 1 fill a good role for the deck, so decide what you value more, as you can opt to go for a 2-2 split or maybe a 3-1 split if you feel you need other cards. A good options to fill those slots in with is Stealth Dragon Togai Shirashi. This card can help you fill your soul and can potentially fuel an Erger every single turn, as when you Persona Route and you use his skill, then you generate 2 soul in a single turn. If you feel like you want to use more counterblast, then Dragonmon Gojo could also be an option. However, right now with less focus on Valiente can result in this card being less optimal. You can also opt to run Sunrise as your starter if you feel like you need a potential draw, and the last thing you could experiment with is that you could try to run only one base Vairina. If you feel like the soul's more spent wisely on an Erger than the right line, then you don't feel bad if you cannot resolve the right line search, so you can play the one-off of the chance of that potential +1, and the other times that's just half the fuel for an Erger. And that's basically all you need to know to get yourself started at building a Nirvana deck and start playing with the essentials that you need for every single strategy that tailors around Nirvana himself with all the Overdress cards. And even though the deck is relatively simple on the surface, the deck does provide a lot of in-depth knowledge and strategy to know when to use certain skills, to know when to use a counterblast or not to use a counterblast, and that's what I really like about this deck. And the best way for you guys to experience that is just to play the deck, because it's almost impossible for me to tell you every single situation and to go and how to navigate through it, because A, you're probably gonna be bored through your mind, and B, you will probably learn way more by just doing so. So definitely try to pick up these cards and try to play this deck, because I definitely cannot recommend this deck more. And if you are now interested in building this deck and you want to get a good place where you can get your cards for cheap, you can head over to Parkage.com, a sponsor of the channel, and you can use the discount code TIMELEAP5 to get 5% discount on all the cards that you order through their site, to hopefully make this deck a bit more budget to your liking. And if you like this type of video and you want to see more, why not hit the like button and the subscribe button down below to be updated for more videos, because we're gonna tackle a lot more deck spotlights on the channel very soon, as we're gonna cover every single build from the Brush of the Legend set. So we have 11 more decks to go through, and we're going to start off with Bruce in tomorrow's video. But with that said, a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I've been Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!